විම් දියර මිලිලීටර් 100 ස්මාර්ට් පැක් එක රුපියල් 85ට දැන් වෙළඳ පොලේ.
හරිම සුමුදුයි.
Tonight on First at 9, this Thursday the 16th of March 2023. Startling revelations. Minister of Education reveals startling statistics from a survey conducted on students of grade 3. Temporary. Professionals Trade Union Alliance calls off token strike today. Solution or not? Economists believe that while the IMF would enhance Sri Lanka's image internationally, it's not the complete solution.
Of course, with the IMF, we would be able to borrow more. So if we end up with piling up foreign debt again and again, so that is not going to solve the problem. Going with the program will improve our international image.
While some believe otherwise.
The IMF conditions in this current situation are likely to make the problem worse.
Declines. Sri Lanka's economy contracted by 7.8% in 2022, reveals the Department of Census and Statistics.
Alliance Finance මෙතුරු රන්නයි සේවාවෙන් රන් පවුම්කට රුපියල් 1,70,000ක ඉහළ අධිකාරම.
ඔබේ විශ්වාසය දිනු සෙන්සුරයින් දැන් ළඟමැති ෆාමසියෙන් ලබාගත හැක.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9 with Andrew Bernard. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
A very good evening and welcome to AdaDerana 24's English News. In your top story for tonight, the Professionals Trade Union Alliance today decided to put a temporary halt to their trade union actions that largely crippled the activities of many sectors, including health and education, yesterday. Accordingly, activities returned to normalcy today as trade unions affiliated with health, ports, electricity, railway, postal, banking and education temporarily called off their strike this morning.
The Professionals Trade Union Alliance decided to put a temporary halt to their strike actions from today onwards after yesterday's nationwide one-day token strike. A number of trade unions affiliated with health, ports, electricity, railway, postal, banking and education joined yesterday's massive strike. As a result, the general public were inconvenienced, with many sectors, especially in the health sector, crippled by the trade union action. However, the Professionals Trade Union Alliance today decided to temporarily call off their token strike. According to professionals, the decision was taken after taking into account the assurances given by the Presidential Secretariat, the views and opinions of trade union members, as well as the inconvenience caused to the general public. Accordingly, the island-wide 24-hour strike launched by the Government Medical Officers Association at all government hospitals came to an end at 8 a.m. this morning. As such, all the activities of government hospitals were carried out as usual. In the meantime, the railway services also returned to normalcy today, subsequent to only 20 trains being operational yesterday due to the token strike of the Locomotive Engine Operators Union and several other employee associations. Meanwhile, the Chief Secretary of the Ceylon Teachers Union, Joseph Stalin, stated that the trade unions of teachers and principals have also decided to temporarily cancel their token strike. As such, activities of many fields including education, banking, postal and ports returned to normalcy and carried out their services without any interruption. However, the Federation of University Teachers Association stated that they would continue their trade union action as necessary solutions were not provided for their demands and staged a demonstration this afternoon in front of the University of Visual and Performing Arts in Colombo.
Now, a startling revelation was made today when the Minister of Education, Susil Premachandra, revealed statistics that stated that 93% of students in grade 3 had failed to meet the required competencies of that level. Announcing these statistics as part of a survey that was conducted, the Minister further stated that while everyone was concerned over the violation of their fundamental rights, no one had considered the violation of the fundamental rights of these children that were violated during the continuous protests carried out across the country.
Are you satisfied with the statistics? Children of the sample nearly 10,000, after analyzing all these statistics, 93% not achieve all competencies. Are you satisfied with the performance or not? No. If you do a survey now, how many primary trained teachers you have in your particular zone to teach the primary level? Now, about 2 years ago, 53,000 graduates given development officer appointments. And out of 53,000, 22,000 were deployed in schools. So most of these graduates send them to primary sections without any kind of training of primary teaching. So where we end up? This is one of the main reasons. Then the supervision. Now, through that 2020 and 2021, we closed schools because of the pandemic to prevent spreading of COVID-19. But after that, 2022, after opening not only Sri Lanka, all the countries, from April till July, April, May, June, July, because of social issues in the country and the economic issues in the country. So who were affected? Primary, not only primary, entire 4.1 million student population. Now yesterday, is there a fault of 4.1 million students? Schools are open, but no teachers. So as a result, of course, parents, they know very well that there will be a closure of schools, so they are not sending their children to school. So if we close like this, even in the future, for days, weeks and months, what will happen to these statistics? So these are social responsibilities of each and every citizen, whether they belongs to any profession. Now see, after 13 years of education, over 330,000 students who sat for GCA level. So we couldn't start paper marking. Is that a fault of parents or students? No. So we need not work. If you all don't work, then how the salaries are paid? How the allowances are paid? So then where are the social responsibility as citizens? So violation of fundamental rights. All the foreign agencies focus on that. But nobody speak about violation of fundamental rights of our students.
Now, the latest data has revealed that the Sri Lankan economy contracted by 7.8% in 2022 compared to its preceding year 2021. The main sectors, agriculture, industry and services, fell by 4.6%, 16% and 2% respectively. The Department of Census and Statistics reported that the gross domestic product for 2022 had declined by 7.8% compared to the previous year. Accordingly, the GDP for 2022 declined to 12 million rupees from 13 million in 2021. Further, overall sector activities such as agriculture had fallen by 4.6%, the industry sector fell by 16%, while service activities declined by 2%. The report by the department highlighted that the fourth quarter of 2022 alone fell to 2.9 million rupees from 3.3 million rupees recorded in 2021, registering a negative growth rate of 12.4%. It further reported that during the year 2022, the depreciation of the Sri Lankan rupee at a notable rate, increase of interest rates to high rates, supply-side disruptions both locally and globally, administrative price adjustments were what caused a record high inflation domestically, and as a whole, the Sri Lankan economy reported a slow performance during the year 2022. In the meantime, the industrial sector had reported a contraction, contrast to the 5.7% expansion it had reported the year before. The manufacture of textiles, wearing apparel and leather-related products is the only manufacturing activity which has reported an expansion of 8.1%. Among the industrial activities, the construction activity, which corresponds to 8% of share of the overall GDP, recorded negative growth rate of 20.9% during the year 2022. Meanwhile, on the service activities front for 2022, the financial services activity and insurance services reportedly fell by 11% and 47.2% respectively. However, among the services-related activities, accommodation, food and beverage servicing activities, postal and courier services, transportation of goods and services, education, telecommunication, public administration and defense, and other personal services have reported positive growth rates during the year of 2022. Now, the senior professor in economics at the University of Colombo, Professor Sirimala Aberatna, says that while the bailout package of the International Monetary Fund is not the entire solution for Sri Lanka's crisis, he believes that the government has resorted to easy options when dealing with the crisis through rate hikes instead of tackling corruption and broadening taxes to include the entire population of the country. He made these statements while speaking to Indivari Amuwath at Hyde Park on AdaDerana 24 during a panel discussion. Now, adding on to these sentiments, the development economist Professor Jayati Ghosh believes that the IMF's package will only steepen the crisis in the country, as the requirements of the IMF's package put Sri Lanka into a never-ending cycle of debt that will not attract investors as expected by officials.
What next do you think is for us? While we say IMF is necessary, but others say, no, this won't address the problems that Sri Lanka faces.
The IMF is not the entire solution that we require. It's good to go with the program with the IMF for a couple of reasons. Number one, it will improve our international image. Number two, we are entering to a program with them so that we can follow up this program to ensure stability, because Sri Lanka does not have a good track record in following programs consistently in the past. So it is good to have a program as such. Number three, probably people get much more than any other. We can borrow again. So with these things, it is okay to go with the IMF, but IMF is not the rescue package that Sri Lanka needs. Fundamentally, our economic crisis is a dollar crisis. We don't have enough foreign exchange to pay for our borrowings. So that is where the problem starts. The IMF program does not address this fundamental issue. It is about stability.
The fundamental issue of the dollar crisis that we're faced with.
So we have to earn dollars, and that is how we can come out of the crisis. To earn dollars, we should have investment.
Is there an option for us to make the economy grow without an IMF program at this juncture, when Sri Lanka has fallen into a deep economic crisis and you need a bailout?
IMF is basically working on the fiscal side and also related other areas like dealing with the government, the public sector enterprises and their problems. Of course, with the IMF, we would be able to borrow more. So if we end up with piling up foreign debt again and again, so that is not going to solve the problem and it's going to make us worse. Anyway, going with the program with the IMF is important because it will improve our international image with the creditors, and also it will help us to improve our investment climate. Even the tax net. I don't agree with the way that the government has worked with the increase in taxes in this country, whereas there are millions of people who can pay taxes in this country, and the government has increased it only for 500,000 people who are already having tax files with the Inland Revenue Departments. Easier things have been done, so not the difficult thing. The government should have expanded our tax base to cover the entire population, whereas the government is not trying to do that.
What is your opinion here?
The IMF conditions in this current situation are likely to make the problem worse, because I think the implications are actually going to be very bad for the macroeconomy. Consider what it is asking for. In a country in which you have already 60% inflation and 90% food inflation, where you've already had electricity hike, fuel price hikes, and ordinary people are suffering very, very badly. You are raising interest rates, you're raising power rates once again, you are asking for a free floating exchange rate that will mean that the Sri Lankan rupee can depreciate further, adding to the imported inflation. Now, in fact, it's likely that the inflation is going to come down now anyway, because the main reason for the inflation was the big devaluation that occurred last year. Now that that devaluation is over and done with, and global prices of food and fuel have come down, inflation is likely to come down from those terrible peaks. So you don't need very tight monetary policy. You don't need to increase interest rates. What will those interest rate increases do? They will destroy micro, small, and medium enterprises who are already struggling, as we all know. And that will, of course, impact employment. And that in turn means that economic activity will not recover. Now, in that situation, to expect this particular particular approach is going to bring stability because foreign investment will start flowing in is ridiculous. I'm sorry. It hasn't worked in most countries where it has been attempted, and it is unlikely to work here.
What about Sri Lanka's image internationally, Professor Ghosh?
Basically, what do international creditors look at? Look at things like the debt to GDP ratio or the debt service to GDP ratio. What has happened right now in Sri Lanka is that your debt to GDP ratio has worsened even when your total nominal debt has come down because your GDP has fallen so much. I mean, there's a kind of 20% decline in GDP over the last 2 years. And that has made your debt to GDP ratio much worse, made your debt service to GDP ratio much worse. That will not get better if you implement a program that causes your GDP to fall further. Since 2016, Sri Lanka has been borrowing to pay its debt. It's completely unviable. You have floated international sovereign bonds so you could pay off the multilateral creditors. Then you went to the bilateral creditors to help you pay off the international sovereign bonds, and so on. This thing has been going on now for 8-9 years. The solution to that is not to say, let's open up to more debt. The solution is to clean up your act and see how you can actually reduce that external debt dependence.
Now, the State Minister of Finance, Shayan Semasinghe, revealed today that the ongoing information survey and verification process for the verification of 1.1 million welfare benefit applications has been completed. The highest verification rate of the 1.1 million welfare benefit application is the Kalutara district at 46%, followed by the Badula district at 34% and the Galle district at 32%. All 1.1 billion applications have been verified across the island. The State Minister stated that the process of verifying whether 3.7 million applications received from 334 divisional secretariats across the island are eligible for receiving welfare allowances is being conducted systematically. Minister Semasinghe also highlighted that the information survey will conclude on the 31st of this month, and failure to provide accurate information prior to the deadline will lead to the loss of welfare benefits. Therefore, the State Minister requests all applicants to provide accurate information to the officials conducting the information survey. And we'll be back with your business news right after this short commercial break.
ගොඩමඩ පෙරලි කරන බලපුළුවන්කාරයා මහින්ද්‍රා යුවෝ ටීමෝ වෙතින්.
Welcome back. The Sri Lankan shares closed higher for a third straight session today, helped by gains in financials and consumer staple stock. The all-share price index rose 0.09% to 9,596.55. The S&P SL20 meanwhile rose to 0.16% to 2,814.61. Senkaragala Finance and LOLC Finance were the top boosts to the index, up by 19.8% and 2.8% respectively. Meanwhile, the trading volume for the CSE all-share price index rose to 71.7 million shares from 66.8 million in the previous session. The market turnover fell to 1.23 billion rupees from 1.63 billion rupees in the previous session. Capital goods sector was the top contributor to the market turnover, whilst the sector index gained 0.33%. The material sector was the second highest contributor to the turnover, whilst the sector index decreased by 1.26%. Foreign investors were net buyers in the equity market, purchasing stocks worth 97.6 million rupees, while domestic investors were net sellers, offloading 1.14 billion rupees worth of shares. Now let's take a look at how the Sri Lankan rupee traded against other major currencies during the day. Now, oil prices clawed back some ground today, recovering from the previous session's 15-month lows, as market claims somewhat after Credit Suisse was thrown a financial lifeline by Swiss regulators. Meanwhile, data from the Energy Information Administration showed that crude inventories rose by 1.6 million barrels, gasoline and distillate stocks fell by a combined 4.6 million barrels.
Brent crude futures were up by 0.7% and settled at $74.23 a barrel. Meanwhile, US West Texas Intermediate crude futures rose by 0.6% to end the day at $68.04. Yesterday, crude fell below $70 a barrel for the first time since the 20th of December in 2021. Brent has lost nearly 10% since Friday's close, while US crude is down about 11%. Meanwhile, Credit Suisse today announced that it would borrow up to $54 billion from the Swiss Central Bank to shore up its liquidity and investor confidence after a slump in its shares intensified fears about a global financial crisis. A fall in US fuel stocks last week supported oil prices. Meanwhile, Energy Information Administration data showed that crude inventories rose by 1.6 million barrels, while gasoline and distillate stocks fell by a combined 4.6 million barrels. According to analysts, OPEC's outlook for China oil demand was also supportive. The oil producer group raised its 2023 China demand forecast this week, and a monthly report from the International Energy Agency flagged an expected boost to oil demand from resumed air travel and China's economic reopening after abandoning its zero-COVID policy. The International Energy Agency report said that commercial oil stocks in developed OECD countries have hit an 18-month high, while Russian oil output in February stayed near levels registered before the war in Ukraine, despite sanctions on its seaborne exports.
And that's all the news we have for you this evening. Join us again tomorrow for the very latest news at the very same time. Tune into our social media pages until then to stay updated. Have a pleasant evening and good night.
For news and information you can trust 24 hours a day, visit AdaDerana.lk.